No. Think we should,
Hold it.
Nuh-uh.
Fuck!
Keep your hands steady.
Ow!
The scene opens in 1956 in the city of Chicago, inside a modest and unassuming fashion store owned by an elderly gentleman named Leonard Burling. Mr. Leonard, originally a British citizen, had relocated to the United States a few years prior. Before making the move, he had spent several years working at a renowned fashion store in London, considered one of the world's best. Mr. Leonard's decision to move to Chicago was motivated by various factors. Upon establishing his own fashion shop in Chicago, Mr. Leonard hired a strikingly beautiful woman named Mabel Shawn as his assistant. The clothing from Mr. Leonard's store had garnered a notable reputation in the city, with several affluent families in Chicago making it their preferred shopping destination. Among these families were the Boyles, renowned as one of the most influential and powerful mafia groups in Chicago. The Boyles frequented Mr. Leonard's shop, either to order custom tailored suits or to discreetly send letters through the mailbox provided within the store. Mr. Leonard had thoughtfully placed the mailbox in his shop, allowing customers to leave tips or exchange messages without drawing undue attention. One evening, Richie Boyle, the sole heir of the Boyle family, visited Mr. Leonard's shop to collect the letters sent by their correspondent. Accompanying him was Francis, a trusted confidant of the Boyles. Mr. Leonard remained composed and unintrusive, displaying no curiosity about the contents of the letters meant for the Boyles. Instead, he dedicated himself to his work as a tailor. Among the letters, Francis stumbled upon a missive from a mafia organization known as the Outfit. Recognizing the sensitivity and confidentiality of the contents, Richie requested Mr. Leonard to temporarily leave the room. As Mr. Leonard departed to the store's lobby, Mabel approached him, presenting a gift resembling a snowball. She explained that this gift had been sent by an acquaintance of hers, as Mabel had a penchant for collecting snowball memorabilia. The story continues with Mabel showing Mr. Leonard a collection of postcards featuring various iconic places from around the world, including the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, and Barcelona. She confides in Mr. Leonard about her deep desire to travel and see these beautiful places someday. Mabel expresses amazement that Mr. Leonard, who could have chosen to open his shop anywhere, opted for Chicago as his home. After Richie and Francis depart, Mr. Leonard informs Mabel that a man from the clock shop next door has expressed interest in getting to know her. However, Mabel, who already shares a close connection with someone else, doesn't seem particularly interested in the invitation. Mr. Leonard astutely observes the flirtatious exchanges he's witnessed between Mabel and Richie while folding napkins. He cautions Mabel to be careful, reminding her that Richie is involved with the Mafia, an organization often associated with violence and weapons. Mabel acknowledges her awareness of the dangerous Boyle family but believes she can handle Richie. She then expresses her desire for a raise to save money for her dream of traveling the world. Mr. Leonard, however, gently suggests that a raise would be contingent on her improving her skills, especially in performing basic tasks such as folding washcloths correctly. As the shop closes for the night, Mabel heads home, while Mr. Leonard remains in the shop to complete some pending work. Late into the night, Mr. Leonard drifts off to sleep at his desk and begins to dream about his family's past and a memory marked by flames. He is suddenly roused from his slumber by the sound of the shop door being opened. To his surprise, it's Mabel and Richie, who have coincidentally chosen this place to spend time together. Mr. Leonard's earlier suspicions about a romantic relationship between Mabel and Richie are now confirmed. That night, Richie opens up to Mabel about his adopted brother, Francis, offering a glimpse into the complexities of his own life. Francis becomes increasingly suspicious that there may be a traitor within their family who is secretly leaking information to their rival mafia group, La Fontaine. Richie, on the other hand, harbors mixed feelings about Francis. Richie's father, Roy Boyle, had always placed immense trust in Francis and relied on him more than his own biological son. Richie doesn't consider Francis to be a true brother or family member but rather sees him as a stranger who once saved his father from 6 bullets. He suspects that his father made Francis his confidant primarily out of a sense of indebtedness. As they eavesdrop on Richie and Mabel's conversation, Mr. Leonard inadvertently drops an object, alerting them to his presence. Swiftly recovering, Mr. Leonard returns to his desk and pretends to be asleep. To avoid disturbing him, Mabel decides to take Richie out of the shop. A few days later, Richie and Francis return to Mr. Leonard's shop, a routine they follow every week to collect their mail. That evening, they discover an envelope from the mafia group The Outfit containing a letter and a cassette. Subsequently, Francis and Richie leave Mr. Leonard's shop to report this matter to Mr. Roy. That same evening, they urgently return to Mr. Leonard's shop. Francis carries Richie, who has been shot in the stomach, into the back room where Mr. Leonard used to work. Francis contacts Mr. Roy, informing him that they've been attacked by the LaFontaine mob and are seeking refuge in Leonard's shop. Mr. Roy promises to come and pick them up soon. Francis then requests Mr. Leonard's assistance in stitching up Richie's wound to stop the bleeding. Initially hesitant, as he has little experience in combat medicine, Mr. Leonard reluctantly agrees. Richie, in unbearable pain and without the luxury of anesthesia, falls unconscious as Mr. Leonard skillfully sutures his wound, effectively stopping the bleeding. The story unfolds further as Francis takes the tape from the suitcase and requests that Mr. Leonard look after Richie for a while. However, Mr. Leonard hesitates, expressing his reluctance to get involved in the troubles and conflicts of the Boyle family. He suggests that Francis take Richie with him in the suitcase instead. Francis insists that Richie stay longer, emphasizing that Leonard's shop is currently the safest place for them. Francis needs to leave immediately to find a cassette player to listen to the tape's contents. He explains that the tapes contain recordings of wiretapped conversations involving a member of the Boyle family. Francis suspects that there's a traitor within their own ranks who is cooperating with the FBI. He mentions that the traitor had planted a listening device in one of the places frequented by the Boyles. Previously, Francis and Richie had intended to play the tape elsewhere, but they were ambushed by members of the LaFontaine group, resulting in Richie's injury. Many mafia groups are after the tapes to dismantle the Boyle family, so Francis must urgently locate a cassette player to identify the traitor. Shortly after Francis departs from the shop, Richie regains consciousness. Mr. Leonard acknowledges that he's aware of the story regarding the tapes and the suspected traitor within the Boyle family, having learned it from Francis. Mr. Leonard then asks Richie if he suspects anyone within their family of being the traitor. Richie remains silent for a moment before bursting into laughter, assuming that Mr. Leonard's words are a jest. Mr. Leonard joins in the laughter and goes back to his work, sewing. Richie remarks that Mr. Leonard couldn't possibly be the traitor because he is just an ordinary tailor. This exchange reveals the layers of intrigue and trust within the Boyle family, leaving Richie to ponder the identity of the real traitor. The tension escalates as Mr. Leonard corrects Richie, explaining that he is not a tailor but a cutter. He emphasizes the distinction between the two roles and suggests that anyone with thread and a needle can become a tailor. Mr. Leonard further reveals that he had studied for years at the Row, considered the best fashion store in the world. He had spent an extended period as an apprentice there before finally gaining permission to open his own shop. Mr. Leonard returns to the topic of Francis's determination to uncover the traitor within their family. He suggests that it's possible the traitor could be Francis himself. In a moment of intrigue, Mr. Leonard had whispered to Francis about Richie's suspicions, sowing the seeds of doubt between them. Shortly thereafter, Francis returns to Leonard's shop, and Richie confronts him. Richie, influenced by Mr. Leonard's earlier insinuations, interrogates Francis about why he was the only one hit by the LaFontaine mob's gunfire, while Francis remained unscathed. Francis attributes his survival to sheer luck and suggests that they play the tape immediately. However, Richie insists on waiting for his father, who is due to arrive soon to pick them up. Tensions escalate to a boiling point, leading Richie and Francis to engage in a physical altercation over the tape. Amidst the struggle, they both reach for the suitcase, only to discover it empty. In a moment of panic, guns are drawn, and Richie fires a shot, missing his mark. In response, Francis shoots Richie in the neck, tragically ending Richie's life. The story continues as Francis hurriedly searches for the tape that Richie had supposedly hidden. Shortly after, Mr. Roy and his men arrive at Mr. Leonard's shop. Francis, feeling a sense of urgency, asks Mr. Leonard to hide Richie's body temporarily and create a diversion to buy him some time to clean the floor and remove any traces of Richie's blood. By the time Mr. Roy walks into the shop, the floor appears clean, and Francis has prepared a fabricated story about Richie's whereabouts. Francis explains that Richie left with a tape from the outfit without informing him of his destination. Concerned, Mr. Roy instructs Francis to immediately locate Richie and bring him back. As Mr. Roy waits, he engages in conversation with Mr. Leonard, revealing that there is a vast and influential mafia organization known as the Outfit, which operates across various countries in Europe and America. Mr. Roy also shares that the Boyle family had received an offer from the Outfit to form an alliance. The Outfit had assisted them by providing FBI wiretapping tapes to identify the traitor within the Boyle family. Mr. Leonard, surprised by this revelation, questions why Mr. Roy is sharing this information with him, as he had previously been kept in the dark about their group's affairs. Mr. Roy deduced Richie's location at Leonard's shop because Richie had left his coat there. Knowing Richie would never leave without his coat in the winter, Mr. Roy suspected Mr. Leonard was hiding something. He threatens Mr. Leonard with a gun to force him to reveal the truth. Before Mr. Leonard can explain further, Francis abruptly enters the room with Mabel in tow. Mr. Leonard, fearing for Mabel's safety, provides an explanation. He claims that Richie left because he felt embarrassed that Francis had managed to shoot 4 of LaFontaine's men while Richie had not shot anyone. Richie had returned to LaFontaine's territory to prove his worth to Mr. Roy. Mr. Leonard also reveals why he hadn't informed Mr. Roy earlier. Richie had explicitly forbidden him from sharing this information to prevent Mr. Roy from worrying. Amid this tense exchange, Mr. Roy queries Francis about why he brought Mabel along. Francis explains that Richie probably went to Mabel's house because she was Richie's girlfriend, shedding light on Richie's motivations and actions. In the final part of the story, Mr. Roy questions Mabel about Richie's whereabouts, but she admits she doesn't know where he is. Francis interjects, mentioning a blood stain he noticed on Mabel's carpet, suggesting it might be Richie's blood. Mr. Roy, growing increasingly agitated, resorts to force to compel Mabel to reveal the truth. Witnessing the escalating situation, Mr. Leonard intervenes, attempting to calm Mr. Roy down. Mr. Leonard, who had previously lost his wife and daughter in a fire, considers Mabel as his own daughter. The phone rings, and Mr. Leonard answers it. Richie is on the line, claiming he's hiding from LaFontaine and requesting to be picked up at street number 31. Upon hearing this, Mr. Roy and his men rush to pick up Richie. Francis opts to stay behind, stating that he will look after Mr. Leonard and Mabel, just in case Richie is deceiving them. Following Mr. Roy's departure, Mr. Leonard reveals a shocking revelation. He deliberately provided the address to street number 31 so that the LaFontaine group could attack Mr. Roy and his men. Furthermore, he discloses that Mabel is the traitor they had been searching for all along. After establishing a close relationship with Richie, Mabel had numerous opportunities to gather information about the Boyle family and leak it to LaFontaine in exchange for money. Mabel, aware that Francis would eventually discover her betrayal, sought the FBI's help to wiretap and apprehend the entire Boyle family, ensuring her safety. Mr. Leonard, who was privy to Mabel's plans, allowed her to proceed because she desired to accumulate wealth for her world travels. He also took it upon himself to conceal the real tapes, protecting Mabel. Later, LaFontaine and his men arrive at Leonard's shop to pay Mabel for the tape. However, before they leave, Francis instructs Mr. Leonard and Mabel to use a coded message. After LaFontaine provides the money, Francis plans to emerge from the back room and eliminate LaFontaine. Unbeknownst to Francis, both Mabel and Mr. Leonard betray him, revealing his whereabouts to LaFontaine's group. Tragically, Francis is fatally shot by LaFontaine's men. Once LaFontaine and his group depart, Mr. Leonard informs Mabel that he had secretly substituted the original tape with a fake one, replacing it with his own voice recording. He had initially loaded the tape and placed it in the mailbox labeled The Outfit to deliver it to the Boyle family. This manipulation was done to sow discord between the Boyles and ensure the original tape remained in his possession. He urges Mabel to deliver the real tape to the FBI to dismantle both the Boyle family and the LaFontaine group. In a climactic twist, Mr. Leonard sets fire to his shop to eliminate all evidence. However, Francis, who miraculously survived his injuries, rises and shoots Mr. Leonard. The shot misses, only injuring Mr. Leonard's arm. Mr. Leonard then reveals his own dark past as a former criminal but explains that he had left his previous life behind after his family was killed in a fire. He moved to Chicago to start anew and become a better person. The film concludes with a poignant scene as Mr. Leonard leaves his shop in Chicago, symbolizing his departure from his old life and his journey toward a better future.